everyone, Richard Carlton here. I'm here along with you. Welcome to an awesome day at fmtrain.tv, where we're going to work with you to teach you how to build great FileMaker custom applications. And today is just another awesome day. In fact, today's Wednesday. Once again, we have Nick Orr from Goya. Nick is awesome. Yesterday he covered BaseElements, kind of the diagnostic tool. And then, of course, he always confuses me. So then today is on the BaseElements plugin, which I can say definitively is the de facto most popular FileMaker plugin in the world. In fact, Claire should just bundle it with FileMaker Pro. Every time you install FileMaker Pro, you should just auto-install BaseElements. It would solve so many problems. Once again, we are broadcasting high definition, so we've already been launched into the weeds on various topics. We're broadcasting YouTube, Twitch, and Discord for some of you. Daily FileMaker training is on this channel. We greatly appreciate everyone comes by here. Definitely support the channel. How you do that? You can support myself. You can also support Nick. Definitely come to fmtrain.tv, buy one of our bundles. We greatly appreciate it. It's how we afford to pay for all this live training, because it's not just me. It's also the production engineers, the people who edit the video, because we just don't throw this stuff on it's streamed to YouTube and these other services, but after that we clean them up. Okay, so then Ken, who was not here yesterday, he's giving us a live testimonial here. He says, watching the recording from yesterday, based on what Nick shared, I then used the trial version and managed to find all sorts of things in my current project that needed fixing. Most of those I never would have found or even thought about looking for it. Thanks to Richard and the show, and Nick with BaseElements. Thanks to Nick for a great tool. Thanks for the discount code. We'll be buying the annual license after today's show. Nick, are you ready to present your awesomeness?
Yeah, certainly. I guess the starting point is probably just to explain why we ended up with a developer tool called BaseElements and then a plugin also called BaseElements. And originally, I actually never intended to sell a plugin. And so we used in BaseElements some third-party plugins, but I needed one to do files, and I needed one to do dialogues, and I needed one to do URLs, and I needed one to do emails. And so I would have had to sort of manage 4 different plugins. I thought it was a waste. I asked around a few of the existing plugin developers and said, could you write one for me? They all sort of weren't really interested. I originally got one of the 360works guys, so I know, Richard, you're a big fan of the 360works stuff. If you've used their super container plugin, it has like a generic function, and then it has a get clipboard function. And the reason that's there is because I paid them to put it there, because I was considering using that as well. So in the end, I got someone to write it for me, and I thought, I'm not really interested in doing anything with this. I'll just open source it and give it away, because it's like 3 functions. And then people found it interesting, and I kept finding more things that I wanted to do with it. So we just kept adding to it. And at some point I thought, gee, maybe I should come up with a name for it. And then FileMaker contacted me to say, hey, we're using the plugin in our next round of training materials. So you happy for us to do that? And I went, yep, but now I can't rename it, because they're going to be out here in the world, in 18 months' time, and then exist for the next, 3 or 4 years. So, it's stuck. So, yeah, so that's the naming history. So, yes, it is confusing. There is BaseElements, the developer tool, and BaseElements plugin is intended to work with the BaseElements developer tool to do all its magic, but it is a free plugin. So it's open source. The code's up on GitHub. You can download it and compile it yourself. You can stick it in any number of your solutions. You don't even need to register it. You don't even need to contact me to say that you're using it. I don't care. You can do it. You can put it on 1,000 computers. You can put it on your own. It doesn't matter. I did want to just go into a bit of detail about plugins and how they work for people that sort of don't understand. If you've never used a plugin before, some of this can be a little bit confusing. So the plugin essentially is, there's a plugin file. I'll show you this little file here. So this has got a set of container fields, just one for each platform. So these are the plugin files themselves, and they get installed in various places in FileMaker Pro, but also in FileMaker Server. So if you have a look on FileMaker Pro, you have a folder called FileMaker in your application support folder on the Mac. There's a similar one on Windows, and your plugin goes in the extensions folder in there. but it can also go in this extensions folder. It can also go in this folder here, and it can also go under shared as well. So there's all sorts of weird places. In older versions of FileMaker as well, they used to have a folder at the root level. So here's your application, here's an extensions folder as well. So there's all this weird hierarchy of where you can install plugins locally. And I'll show you in a sec a way to get around that. So essentially, whenever you've got one of these plugins installed, and you can tell what's currently installed up here, here's BaseElements 4.14, that's installed. That can reveal the particular folder. So that's, as you can see, it says reveal folder, even though it's saying it.
Hey, just so you know, everyone can see that if you want to clear that one out of the way.
Yep.
Cool.
Beauty.
So 4.14 is the current release right now?
4.14 hasn't been released yet. 4.12 is the one up on the website. We're just doing a couple of other builds of 4.13 to get that out. But yeah, 4.12 is the latest one up on the website. So plugins, when they're installed on FileMaker Pro in the various application library folders, they then add functionality to FileMaker. You can also install plugins on FileMaker Server, but the confusion is a plugin on FileMaker Server doesn't add any functionality to the FileMaker Pro client. So if you have a FileMaker Server and you've got 30 users and you want to be able to use plugin functions in your solution, then every one of those 30 users has to have the plugin installed. And if you're a developer like me, I use different plugins for lots of different things. If I install the BaseElements plugin for one of my solutions, then the other solution can potentially access those functions as well. But again, they have to be programmed in, and I'll show that in a sec. So you need to install in every client that's going to access the functions that you're going to use. On the server, the reason for having them on the server is that you can run scripts on the server via perform script on server and via script schedules. So if those scripts that you're running use plugin functions, then you also need to have the plugin installed on the server. So you can understand there the difference between those two, and the easiest way, you can copy this physical file into the folder, but I would recommend that you never do that and instead use a script step. So install plugin file, and you have to pick the different ones. Obviously, you've got different ones for different platforms here. Install plugin file will do exactly what you want. You need to separate between Mac and Windows. This allows for older versions as well. So previously there was 32-bit versions and 64-bit versions. The plugin file on Mac was a bundle, so it was both 32 and 64, but BaseElements these days is 64-bit only. So this will be version 4. This will be version 4. The Linux one will also be version 4. This 32-bit one will be 3.38, I think it was, because that was the last 32-bit version we did these days. And these things here, this platform is cloud, are just custom functions that I wrote. So we also now have a beta Linux server. So the AWS cloud was based on Linux, but we now also have a beta FileMaker server for Linux. So that will be really cool. We can run plugins here. And there are differences between what works.
Yeah, there you go. You're just actually, I interrupted you, and you were going to answer the question that was just asked. Are the features the same between the Mac and Windows and I guess Linux?
Between Mac and Windows, absolutely, yes. Linux, mostly only because of the difference between what runs on Pro versus what runs on server. So obviously the server doesn't have access to a user interface, so it can't put up dialogues or do anything like that, or can't launch external windows, things like that. But it still can run all the other bits and pieces. There's no real, in BaseElements at least, there's no real Mac versus Win specific functions. And separate also on this, there is actually an iOS build as well. So if you're using the iOS SDK, you can include the BaseElements plugin there as well. So,
all right. So I have a question. So if you go to baseelements.com,
yep.
Is this the diagnostic tool or the plugin? Which one am I looking at here, or is it both?
The BaseElements.com is the diagnostic tool.
Okay, so how do we get to, what's the link for the plugin then? We go to Goya, or what do we do?
Yeah, go to Goya. I'll find the link and I'll send it to you.
Or we can find it. Someone was asking me the question. Or yeah,
Yeah.
just put it on your screen there if you can do that. That'd be easy.
So there's not a huge, big, general site, but
Okay.
there is .baseelementsplugin.com. So then I guess the question is, what does the plugin do? So I'm going to bring up the edit expression dialog here. So this is just in Data Viewer, and we're going to show these by type because here is where base elements appears. So it appears as functions in your calculation dialog, and this is then the list of everything that base elements does. As you can see, it's a fairly big list. It's grown over time. There's a whole heap of different things in there. The idea originally, as I said, was that it was just a couple of things that I needed. And after that, we found really cool stuff that we wanted to do. And then a lot of this cool stuff that we wanted to do has then pushed back into the product itself. For example, we have in here a JSON array size function. So that counts the size of an array. Now, we used to have set JSON, and we used to have a JSON path, a bit like the JSON get element, but they're still in there. They're hidden now because they're not needed anymore. They've been deprecated because FileMaker built their own. And I was actually at a session at DevCon where Clay, one of the programmers for FileMaker, said, "Oh, we're doing all these JSON functions. We've based our examples off the BaseElements plugin." So they actually look at what other tools, including this plugin, are doing, and then go, "Yep, let's do all that." All of this here, the HTTP stuff, is very similar to what is available in the insert URL script step. So they do very similar things. It's obviously designed slightly differently, but these ones do still some things that the insert from URL doesn't do. So we keep them alive there. The other ones that Comet have recently been put into FileMaker the product, the whole heap of file functions. So we've got the ability to open files and read files. And again, there's stuff here that the product itself doesn't do. So being able to do list folders, but include various options like whether or not you're including subdirectories and returning the full path or just the file names, and whether you include hidden files, things like that. So there's a lot of things essentially that are cool functions that FileMaker has slowly accrued over time, but not all of them. So let me
jump in here. So this is it's kind of an endorsement. So when you build a product like this, and it's kind of free, and then Claris goes, "Oh yeah, that crap that Nick guy put together, right? It's like really cool. We should like steal that and stick it in our product." So literally what happens, I can tell you this, you don't have to ask Nick. The engineers at Claris call Nick and they start talking, right? Because so there's all this URL protocol stuff with the curl options, right? And I remember an ongoing in-depth conversation with the certain engineers who were nameless, who kept calling Nick going, "How'd you do it this way? And how'd you do it this way? And why do we do it this way?" And so they basically stole like a huge chunk of stuff in here and put it in FileMaker, 16, and then got better in 17? Is that what it was? Or did it start in 17? When did that come in?
It came earlier than 16, but they made it actually they changed slightly one of the parameters to make it usable, because it used to, insert from URL used to corrupt your data.
Oh, okay. It would corrupt your data. Okay, well, that's always a good feature. I wouldn't call that a feature. I'd call that a bug. But you're such you were such a nice guy. You were eternally a nice person.
Yeah. It used to replace ampersands in your URL string if it found them. So it would think that you're sending data, and then it would encode them, and you're like, "No, I've already encoded them there. They don't need to be re-encoded." So they fixed that in 16 and made it an optional checkbox, and then I think it was 17 that they added, or 17 or 18 they added a whole heap more, so it became actually really, really useful now.
Yeah, no, it's been a big help. And I asked Nick, so this is not like not our first rodeo together. I asked Nick, doesn't it bother you when they steal your features? And it's like imitation is the best form of flattery, right? and because he's always doing new features, right? So yeah, what do you think?
I would love them for all these things to exist. So in the product, it's just like steal the whole lot, please.
I'm sorry, I'm yelling at the screen, but yeah, steal the whole lot, please. Yeah, load the whole thing in there, because if you could put these features all in the product or and then maybe give Pro away for free so we get it in all the developers' hands.
Yeah.
The number of people that'd be using FileMaker within a year would be up 30%. Claris would actually grow the platform, right? So.
Yeah. So as an example, this function, filter values, right? So you've got A and B, and you want to filter values and find just the B's, you get B back. But the other one that people want to do a lot of is the reverse of that. So what you want to do is a filter out. So essentially take my list and remove a whole bunch of values and just give me what's left. So I find that super useful.
Well,
but there is no native.
Yeah, because when you filter, a lot of times when I filter, I'm thinking of filter out, not like filter in, right? But I guess, first time I had to learn that, because that, by the way, what you just see right here is on the certification test. It's actually a little harder than this, but they try to trick you by that. What they'll do is they'll actually describe an answer that's actually what this thing does. Then they'll say, oh, filter this, and what do you get, right? And then, of course, filter is also case sensitive. They like to throw that in there too. So, yeah, it's there's so many. It's like there's so many functions in here. It's hard not to find something you don't love, right? So,
yeah. And we've got now a sort values. I've been using the BE one for years and years and years. Someone did a speed test on sort values with different data sets and found that the BE one in an external plugin function is actually faster than the native one. I've got no idea why. I don't know how they can manage to make that their own native code slower, but they have managed to do that. So that's been there. Obviously we don't need ours anymore, but it's still in there.
How much difference in speed is it? Like 10%? Or are we talking a lot more than that?
It was significant. Yeah, it was a factor different. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's why you don't want to get rid of it if it's a better implementation. So. Yeah. All right. Well. Wow. So what are your favorite ones? I'm looking here and I see vector dot product. Right? Is that like linear algebra kind of stuff, or what do we? I just
Yeah. The dot product of two lists, vectors, and numbers. So.
Wow.
I don't understand it. Someone asked me about that. Could we add a function to do that? And I went, yeah, sure. If you've got some C code, and he wrote some C code, and we added it in. I do not understand what these are. I get that for myself.
Well, I'm a mechanical engineer, and I got my kicked at UC Davis from all that stuff, right? So I recognize it vaguely, but that was 30 years ago. I don't remember.
Yeah.
I don't remember what it was. I just remember it being difficult.
Yeah.
So. All right, how's the Discord people going here? Okay, David, there are some questions here. Hang on. So the BaseElements plugin is totally free. Yes, David, Angel, it's totally free. But there is a option to kick them a couple bucks, and that gets you some enhanced goodies in it. So there is kind of like a paid. He really doesn't push it. Notice we've been here for 30 minutes, really. Well, 35 minutes or so, but he's been talking for 20. He hasn't asked for money yet, right? And so what happens is that there is this option to give them, how much is it per year to be on your happy support bonus program for this?
$199 per developer. So we do it as a per developer thing. Okay. So yeah.
Yeah, and that gets you all sorts of extra goodies. I'm sure he'll cover that. David also says, how is BE made? C++? Question mark.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and that's just because that's the API that we have to be able to do this sort of thing. It's an old C API that FileMaker gives us. So yeah. Okay.
And then another question is, as your filters value out, is it like substitute? Well, it's like the filter function. It's the opposite of the filter, right? So It's filter in. The filter function FileMaker is filter in, and this one is filter out. It's not a substitute function, right? So, David, you got to make sure you master that before you take the certification test. It will bite you in the ass. So, questions elsewhere. Michael Gravel's there. Candida's there. They're not saying too much. Yeah, it's really quiet. All right, you can keep going. So, what are your favorite functions, Nick?
Yeah, so I'll break them sort of into groups and do a couple that I really like. Obviously, the insert from URL, we don't use our plugin much anymore. We also had in here that's sort of starting to go away the ability to do SMTP, but we can do that in FileMaker now. The only difference that this one has is that you can do HTML still. So as an example, we sent out an email. This is a copy of it that we get. This goes out to users of a particular solution about it. It's got a nice little HTML button on it for you to get and do that. So that comes from FileMaker. It is sent out, but you've actually got to generate the text, which is this bit here, and then you've got to generate a HTML version. So HTML is quite tricky. You've got to generate all of this code and put that in that.
And doing HTML in emails is always harder than doing HTML on a website, because email clients are infinitely more picky. They don't do stuff the same way. And so that's whenever you see problems with my emails, it's because we're always wrestling with the variations between the email clients, right? So, yeah. Okay, cool. All right, what else? So you have different groups here. You have email there. What else you got?
So that's kind of handy. The values stuff, I use this all the time. So there's different values ones in here as well. So just a couple of these different ones. Values contains duplicates. So just to do a quick check whether there are duplicates within a value list. To sort, to duplicate to repeat essentially a list of values. To trim, so you can remove white space from the start and the end of every value in a value list. So rather than doing
because trim will do just the end caps, right? But it doesn't do the
trim. Trim treats it as one big text block. But a lot of the times, what you want to do is do it on each of the values in a list. Removes duplicates, so just to get unique. And the thing about these value ones in particular, you can do these sorts of things in FileMaker either via things like recursive custom functions or perhaps in the while function. But the reason to do them in the plugin or as native functions if they ever build them is that doing this stuff, there's like functions in C to do a lot of this. So there's not much code actually to do it. But because it's native in C, you can do heaps of stuff like this, and it's really fast. And it works off massive data sets. So, a recursive custom function that you write in FileMaker that does the same thing will work, but it will be a heck of a lot slower than anything that the plugin can do. So the values ones are huge for me. Some of the other ones we use a lot and that I really like, the ability to get and set the clipboard. So you can get text off the clipboard. If they've copied a file, like an image, for example, you can get that and you can put that into a container field, and then you can set it as well. So if you have buttons that generate, data in your solution and you want to be able to set someone's clipboard with a, copy button, you can do that. I find that really, really handy. We have variables in here. So we have the ability to get and set variables, which is really interesting because a variable in the plugin sense exists across the entire application. So you can have variables that are multi-file variables, and they don't appear in the data viewer. So these only exist in the plugin itself. So that's kind of handy. We have a data type. Yeah.
Well, there's a question here. I don't want to disrupt. Don't forget, we're going to go back to data type. But Scott's asking, how would you use the duplicate function to locate possible duplicate items like addresses, right? So but that's like a find command, right, Scott?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like where you put an exclamation point on the find. I guess, I don't know. I mean, if you want to address that one, he's asking about duplicate functions and
If you had your addresses as a list, so say you had a found set and you pulled together a list in people, addresses like that, you could then do values contains duplicates like that. Oh, I lost it. Copy that. So that would tell you whether or not two people had the same address. It's going to be exact. It's going to be an exact match. So typos would, slight typos or slight text differences between them would give you false
Scott.
negative.
That's dicey because it's like street versus st versus lane, ln or lane.
Yep.
You'd want to run the whole thing through some sort of postal cleanup service, right? You know, Nick, I'm just talking out of my ass here, but stop me when I say something stupid. But you'd want to clean the whole thing up with an online service, free or otherwise. Once it's standardized, then you could hammer it. But if you just have stuff that you've typed in by hand, So, sorry.
Yeah. So the other one was a data type that I think FileMaker should add. So we don't have the concept of arrays in FileMaker. They're a bit like lists, but also slightly different. So you can get and set arrays from value list and find within an array and delete arrays. They're kind of useful, but I don't use them a lot. I had sort of specific examples for them that I wanted to do, and then I haven't used them much since. One that I really want to play with that I haven't yet built in is this idea of a stack. So in BaseElements, the developer tool, there's a back and forward button that you can use. And essentially what that does is it just adds to a list that's over time. Programming languages they call stacks. So essentially you just add things to the stack. So each time you go somewhere, you push a value onto the stack.
Ooh.
So the value turns out to be the last place I was. So I was on this layout and on this record. And each time I go somewhere, I push that value onto the back stack. And then each time I want to use it, I just pop a value off that stack and take that and then do something with
it. I have
so
a question.
Like
does it preserve your state as well, like your sort state, or just your record you're on in the layout? What does it preserve?
The stack function doesn't. So it's just storing the data that you send. So it's just up to FileMaker to then you have to script to say, okay, go to this layout and go to that record. So in BaseElements, the developer tool, there's a non-native version of this with variables, and I do it with global variables and a counter that says where in the global variable array you are. So essentially it does a go to related record, pulls an ID, and then pulls a layout that you're on, and then does go to related record to end up on that layout. But this just makes that coding of that really handy.
Oh yeah.
One of the other ones that comes up quite a lot is this ability to fiddle with containers as well. So that converts container fields between compressed and uncompressed. This will tell you the data types for a container. So I don't know if everyone knows, like when you store an image inside a FileMaker container field as a insert image type, FileMaker internally converts it to a couple of different formats. So if you store, for example, a PNG file, FileMaker will separately convert that PNG file to a JPEG file, because when you're doing viewing being put on a layout and made smaller than their original, the smaller file contains a thumbnail that's generated on the fly. So the thumbnails are generated only from JPEGs. So when you store any other image formats, FileMaker also generates a JPEG for you. So you can actually get a particular type. You can actually use that to take advantage and use like FileMaker as a sort of basic image conversion option for you, because it will store inside the container field a whole bunch of different types, and then you can pull one of those particular types out. The other one is this convert container. So when you're storing a file of any sort in a container, you've got two options. You can insert it as a file or you can insert it as an image. A file, you can actually take an image file type, so a JPEG or a PNG or a PDF, and store it as a file, but it will just appear as an icon. So it will appear as an icon, a bit like those container, the plugin files in the container that I showed before. So this one lets you convert between the different formats. So you can actually use that to say, take this image file that's stored as a file and turn it into an image so that I can actually see the content of the image. So that one comes in really handy. One of the other ones, obviously, is and this has been added as well in FileMaker, the ability to execute scripts by name. So before the perform script by name existed, that was really handy because you could have programmatic things that you were doing. You can do execute SQL. Where did I put that? The FileMaker SQL. There's a huge difference between this and the execute SQL one that FileMaker itself has. If you have a look, the BE one has an option for database name. So you can actually do SQL on other databases. The other thing that the plugin, and this is any plugin that does SQL, the only advantage the plugin does, this one does select only. So this shouldn't be SQL query. This should be called select query.
Right.
Because that's all that it does. Whereas this SQL statement can be select, insert.
Oh, I didn't know that. You can do the whole
Update,
update and delete, right?
And delete. Yep. And drop. So anything that you can do in SQL via ODBC with FileMaker, you can do natively within FileMaker via the plugin. So really handy for being able to drop things like log data into a table. So for example, you're somewhere deep into a particular spot and you want to generate a log to say, this action happened. You can just do an insert. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to go to any layouts. You don't have to switch. You don't have to create new records. You don't have to do any of those things. You just do an insert and, log the fact that this happened.
Wow.
So that's really handy.
Yeah, big time.
I actually use that as well and I'll see if I can bring the code up. I used it in BaseElements itself. One of the things I showed yesterday was the fact that we have a preferences file in the prefs folder that stores things like your most recently used file and a few other things. So obviously once I've dropped that into that file, into the preferences folder once, if you've got subsequent versions of BaseElements, that file can't be changed. I can't just override it with new data. So it has to stay the same no matter which version of BaseElements you're running. But I also found that I add features to that file over time. So there's other things that I want to record. So, I started just with a couple of basic preferences and then I add a new option in BaseElements and then I go, oh, hang on, I'm going to need another field in here for some particular thing. So I actually use that SQL plugin script step. I'll see if I can locate it.
Yeah, for those of you wondering, that's a local file that he force quit, and it was doing a consistency check, right? So,
a machine died yesterday.
Yep.
So I actually do this, and I'll open this up. So that code adds a field to my table.
Adds a field to your table.
So I've run that. Yep.
All right.
So that adds the field description.
All right. Well, just for the record, I've been around doing this a long time. I was unaware that you could do that. That's impressive. That's impressive.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
So you're altering your data structures on the fly as you go along.
Which for most of the people here would be really bad, but there are a handful of you here who understand. This is literally, it's a little like the radioactive sign, right? You got the little radioactive sign. It's like the nuclear weapon here, right? So you want to be very careful with how you use this thing, right? Because it might blow up your stuff. So yeah, Yeah, having your scripts define fields, then you have a script malfunction. It defines an extra 5,000 fields or something because it gets stuck on a loop. And then one Brutterman says, what about a dialog functions for listing files and folders and picking files from the dialog? Ooh.
Yeah, so a file select dialog. So let's run this one. That in folder path I'll take out, and I'll just turn this off because I don't want it coming up 1,000 times. And you can add whatever text you want, select the file, and then we hit evaluate, and that will ask you pick a file.
Okay.
So I can pick a file here, and I'll pick this folder because this is the folder that you get.
Oh, that's part of your.
Before you can become a sponsor.
Yeah, you being a sponsor of the product, you pay that money per year, and you get all the versions. And
yep.
Samples. By the way,
so this is a little Dropbox share.
Yeah, you get a Dropbox share, and this is the versions and samples and tools and all sorts of extra widgets. So if you want to shed a couple bucks, you can get some extra goodies. So go ahead. Oh, look at those samples.
Yep.
Ooh.
So just some various integration things we've done, older versions, some tools to convert between different paths, and a few other little bits and pieces there. So that's what you get. I hit cancel. Oh, I didn't select the file, so I didn't show you what the path was, but there we go. We'll pick that one. We'll do key tester, and it returns the path to that file.
Okay.
You can, you can do the same thing with folders, the folder select dialog, so that will put up the standard folder path. So again, I'll pick that and I just get the folder instead. You can read files, you can open files, move files, copy files, delete files, check whether they exist. File import, which is the same as inserting a file in a container field, except the built-in function script step in FileMaker to insert files in a container field doesn't work on server. So file import also works on server, so that you can put things you can pull things out of the documents folder on FileMaker server using a script via perform script on server. So that's really handy.
Ken says the time zone offset looks very cool, or maybe that's the pilot in me for you. See, yeah, that's always been a pain in the ass for me. Is that UTC or what is that?
Yep. Yeah. So this is the difference in time between where you are in time zone offset. So
is that in minutes?
It's minutes. Yeah.
So you divide by 60 and then
ahead.
you get your hours. Yeah. Although, it's funny. There are places that, like in some places in India, where it's not just an hour off. It's like an hour. It's 30 hour and 30 minutes off. So it's like just I don't understand how that works there. So it's negative number. It could be negative or positive number, right? Because which side of the date line? Yep.
PDF ones as well. So the ability to append PDFs. Now we can generate a PDF from FileMaker from a layout and have that be appended to a particular existing PDF, but we can't take two PDFs and just stick them together. So this lets you do that. And the ability as well to pull individual pages out of a PDF. So if you've got an existing PDF that someone sends you and you say, look, I want to generate a different PDF that is only page 2 and 3, then you can do that as well. That's really handy.
File import from, this is from David, import a file. Doesn't it work with script from server? I mean, so the way server works natively is that you're limited to certain directories, right? You just can't run wild. So do you have a import that does more than that? What do you have?
No, you still that's permissions, and that's outside of anyone's control on
the sandboxing.
If I'll just create a new script here and pull it up in a window.
Okay.
So if you want to do, close that off. If you want to do insert file, whatever that happens to be, insert file doesn't work on server.
Yeah.
So it just
insert
plain
file
does not work.
Okay.
So if you're running a script and you want to bring a file out of the documents folder on FileMaker server via perform script on server, you can't do that. But I don't know why you can't. It seems like an odd thing to exclude, but you can't.
So you're saying what you're talking about if you're taking it into a container, right? Is that what you're saying? Insert a file into a container?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the way around that, instead, let me just, I'll bring that back up again. So insert file doesn't work on server. But what you do instead is set field. Let's just pick, it doesn't matter any of these, just go data. I don't actually know what these fields are. And you do the file import and path. So that does the same thing as insert file.
Wow.
How we get this now?
Wow. Yeah, because we just ran into this with some other stuff. We were wrestling with WebDirect on it. So, because WebDirect is pretty limited, especially in mobile devices. So, yeah, it's interesting. So, Ken is asking the question, some of the functions that we have, some of the functions have the word, quote, external in the description. What does this mean?
External in the description. Where was that?
I guess when you're down there, it's
just that these are different types here. So all functions by name or functions by type. So plugin functions appear by themselves and they're given this, external.
External means it's outside of FileMaker. They're all external, right? So they're not an internal.
Yeah.
Because most of these up here are built into FileMaker, right, Ken? So this tells you that it's, if you had 360 works, there'd be a 360 over here, whatever, and then they would be external too, right? So, but like I said, once again, I would vote to take your product and build it into the FileMaker Pro, and then they could make it internal or just ship the plugin with it. That'd be one way of doing it. So, man, that would be great.
Yeah. Yep. A couple more that I really like, being able to set preferences. So this gets set in a per user, standard, Mac OS preference option thing as well. So you can have things that are stored locally that persist between, different copies of FileMaker and different versions and things like that, that you can then load up on the start. So again, in BaseElements, the developer tool, when you purchase it, the details that you use are stored in preferences, and that way, if you grab another copy of BaseElements, it opens up and it just goes, oh, yep, no worries, I'll load the preferences, cool, I've already got a reg key, off I go. I find that really handy. If you work at all these days with web services, you'll be doing stuff in JSON, but you also probably do a whole bunch of things in XML, and being able to do XML, if you work with XML at all, these are super, super handy. So being able to do XPath, essentially, if you talk to a web service and it gives you back XML, you can then pick out individual little bits of the XML and with this. This is essentially the same as the JSON get element function, but for XML.
Yeah, so Scott was asking about using the preference for the FM training video. Yeah, we're already doing that, Scott. We write preference files using the file control creator of features of FileMaker that were part of 18. So we write 2 preference files that go into the user's documents directory. And so we write the, he's making it simpler, but we wrote our own using that, right, with the native capability. There's always, when you make a video player, people always want it to do more, right? Someone will probably ask me to have it install an SSL certificate for them on their server. I'm waiting for that. But yeah, no, it's being able to write text files and then bury them in a documents directory and things like that, very, very useful. I mean, there's so much in here. I mean, I don't know how you keep all this stuff straight in your head, right? I mean, this is, that's a lot.
There's stuff I've asked for because I wanted it, but I haven't. Then this stack stuff is an example, stuff I've asked for because I've got a really cool thing I want to do there, and then I haven't got around to doing it. So there's stuff in there that I've not used myself. The last couple of ones are just there's a zip and an unzip and a gzip. And the only reason for the gzip is that's the internal, when you compress a container field, it's actually stored as a gzip file rather than a regular zip file. So
Is
you
that
can zip and
is that
unzip
a
files
seven
as well.
zip or is that different than 7-zip?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. It's a standard ish zip.
Well, there always seem to be like new zip algorithms that come out and they compress better and better and better. But then the older backwards compatible ones are like less efficient, right? So I guess gzip is more efficient, right? So yeah.
So I think that's kind of it. I mean, we've covered pretty much all of the bits. There's a couple in here that were just concept ideas that I didn't really know what to do with. The thing that I've shown you here is, and this example here is how this is how FileMaker works essentially. The BaseElements plugin works essentially. These are all functions, so there's no script steps at all. So I find that useful because you can do things like a case where you have A and then function here, and B and then function here. And then plugin functions, for example, might do things like dialogue, for example. So even though you've got a single set field or set variable steps that you're doing here, potentially, essentially, what you've done is that's the equivalent. Doing that's the equivalent of an if A, then display dialogue, else if B,
with message
then
choice,
display dialogue.
Yep.
But it's just a short version. So there's ways, and only one of those will display depending on which one gets picked. So there's ways of using functions that you can't use script steps for. However, and I don't even know which version it was, but one of the versions of the plugin API let us also create script steps. So lots of the other plugins that are around have the option to do various things in script steps. So instead of instead of having for example, get text, clipboard get text, or set text is probably a better example, clipboard set text function that you've then got to invoke via set variable clipboard set text. You can have a set text script step, but I've ummed and ahed about whether or not it's worth us putting the coding effort to code lots of these things up as script steps. Essentially what it is, the way that FileMaker's done this is it's a wrapper around your existing functions and you get the option to add a bit of user interface. So for some things it's really handy, but others it's not. So all I did instead was the ability to generate your own script steps. So you could have script steps that you generate on the fly that you then run. I don't know, I've not yet come across a really good use for that you'd want to be generating new script steps on the fly.
Yeah, well, but I think that's the future of the platform, especially with all this XML, which is really great. So, okay, so let's just wrap questions here. Canberra says, "Quiz the extensive list. Is there a script step where I tell it what I want to do and it tells me what script steps to use?" Yeah, I mean, I guess, can you let me back up. You know your little help description down there? You got your function list and this. Is there a way to search? Does that work? Can you search? Can you search on that? Is that searchable?
No, I think this links to the old.
If you could search on that, that's I think what Canberra would love to do. I think that would be really useful. So you could put keywords in there, right?
But it's all documented on that documents page. So this has a list of all these functions and documents them all as well. So you can search in here.
Carlos says, "Is there any progress on the feature enabling printer selecting and switching?" Well, you do that with other plugins. Do you do printer selecting and switching with this thing or no?
No, not at the moment. It's on my to-do list, and I don't have an answer for that. No.
Yeah, Carlo,
on my to-do list.
I would just simply ask the question: if you want to encourage Mr. Nick here to build something. I always like people who are like, who don't spend any. Some of the biggest complainers I have about my training are ones who actually don't buy my training. It's really kind of funny. And so I have kind of like this like thing where, if I'm going to complain, I want to make sure I at least threw the guy a little bit of money. And so my recommendation is, if you want to complain about something that's not in the plugin, you need to be over on his website. Can you show us where we can go buy the super bonus enhanced plugin support? You'd be a sponsor. There it is right there. Yep. So I would simply ask, see, this is the one I normally get. I'm going to have to go fill this out later today and fill that out. So, yeah, that allows, it makes me feel better about complaining. So go ahead.
Yeah, the idea of that is lots of these things, the idea of the functions are that they're generic. So you can, we expose enough of what you need to do, but then give you options to do all the different things you want to do. So, XPath and the HTTP, there's, abilities to do various curl options, a bit like in Insert from URL, but there's 1,000 of these curl options and they all do different things, and then your web service is different, and then all that, and you've got to try and figure out how it all works. That's the idea of the sponsorship, is that you go, hey, I'm trying to do this thing. I don't know how to do it. I can't make it work. I know I need your plugin to make it, do what it is. It might be XML or XPath or some sort of weird curl thing. That's what the sponsorship's for. And for lots of people, what we do is we just go, okay, look, I can't make this work. Give me a sample file. And so someone will put together a sample file. They'll send it to me. I'll make it work, and then I'll send it back to them. So they've got working code that they can then go on and have a play with. So that's what the sponsorship's for, as well as us to continue to develop it. So we do appreciate all the people that do sponsor, just because, I've got a programmer that I pay to write all this stuff. I don't write it myself, but I pay a programmer to do it. I've spent way more in payments to that programmer than I have retrieved on sponsorships, and I'm fine with that, because this gets out there. It gets Goya out there. There's thousands of people that use this every day, and they love it. This is one of those little give back to the community things that I'm able to do.
And then you do get the Dropbox full of goodies, and a lot of times the things that you need to have done are already in there, right? Like the Dropbox of goodies. Can you just show us that real quick, the Dropbox of goodies? Like what might they get, which would be so amazing?
Is a common thing that comes up all the time, is this ability to convert between file paths. This is only added into, I think in FileMaker now we've got is it a function that, so this only got added in 19. So we used to use our own function. I haven't played with it to see whether that does exactly the same thing as what ours does. Samples, this was the file that I showed before, that ability to install plugins. So just a sample, that comes in really handy for lots of people. They go, how do I do this? How do I get my latest version up on the file? This one came up recently. Someone said to me that their web publishing engine keeps crashing, and I need to be able to restart it. So this little file, all it does is queries the web publishing engine and then manually forces a reboot of it. So,
whoa! Really? Stop! You just blew my mind. This can force a web publishing engine reboot if you have it on the server?
Yeah. So you put this file on your server, queries the web publishing engine, so you test WPE, you run that.
Okay, is Jacob Taylor here? He's my head of IT server god services. I don't know what we call him. He likes this title of like main cheese of IT, but the reality is he's really kind of the senior server architect, strategist guy. And he's always telling me, I had to restart the web publishing engine. It died, and I had to use a command line, and then it worked. And I'm like, okay, that sucked. And so if we could have a plugin where we just hit a button that would do it, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So someone had an issue that the web publishing engine kept dying.
Okay.
And they asked me about it, and I said, I've actually wrote a file that does that. So this is just a FileMaker file. You put it up on that FileMaker server, and then you set up a schedule to run it every minute or 30 seconds or however often you want to check.
Check.
Just goes,
oh God, yeah, check it. Oh,
yeah.
so it's a you're running it with Sassy. Okay, got it. Sassy.
Yep. And so it's just doing insert from URLs. And there's a couple of different things here. There's a generic one to test the XML API, which is a good way to see whether customer publishing is running at all. This is REST-FM, which is just another web service thing that we wrote, so it's doing that as well. And then it's just interpreting various different options of what it gets back, saying, did it work, does this work, does whatever. If it finds an error, it can send you an email, and then it will also run the execute command. So that's the ability to run shell commands. So you can do that on FileMaker Pro, so you could run a Mac OS terminal command, or on Windows you can run a command there as well. That's actually then happens on the server. So as you can see, it's doing command, but actually running fms admin restart web publishing engine.
My head was blown already, but now my head's blown double blown. So there we go, double the blow. All right, Andre wants to know if he takes feature requests. Normally, you have to send him the sponsor money, and then he takes feature requests, right, Andre? Although Andre does kick back a lot to the community, so if you want to throw him a feature request, I would do it. I just, like anyone else, if you want him to take it seriously, you might want to be that sponsor person, right? So,
go here and hit the contact us button.
Yep, contact us
on the docs page.
There you go. Cool. All right. And then David goes, that per the last conversation, the execute command is like a send event command, right? I mean, but it's more, That's what he said.
It's a bit like an event command, but you're essentially running an OS level command, so you can do whatever the OS that the user that's launched FileMaker can do. So on a desktop Mac or Windows, that's the logged in user. On FileMaker server, that's actually the FM server user.
Yeah.
So you can't, as FM server, do it. There's a whole bunch of things you just basically can't do because the
is it send event? Isn't that AppleScript? Is he talking AppleScript with that? I think, or is that something else I'm thinking of? Because it seems,
Yeah. So, I mean, you can. There's ways from the command line to run AppleScripts. So you could do.
I mean, AppleScript's kind of this, kind of really deprecated technology, but it's there. So you want to use.
That's what it is.
Yeah, there you go.
So you can do that sort of thing. So that would run a AppleScript off the command line. But
if you really was excited about that. Nick, we greatly appreciate it. I'm going to cut you loose. If you folks have any questions, if they have a general question like to support, is there you had the one contact there. Do you have a support email like support at Goya, or how's that work?
There is one that's the at BaseElements plugin, but I can't tell you off the top of my head. I've got too many domains. But nick at goya.com.au as well will get to me.
Okay, cool. All right, everyone. We'll catch you tomorrow. How long is this Engage 2020 RCC coupon code good for? How long will that last, Nick?
Good question. I hadn't said it, but I usually do it for 30 days after the end of Engage. So, Engage is next week, so probably till at least the end of August.
End of August, and then your turns to a pumpkin. Cinderella turns to a pumpkin at midnight. So there you go. All right, everyone. We'll catch you tomorrow. Appreciate it. And then go buy his stuff. It's awesome. All right.
Thank you, Richard.
guys just stepped up the whole way. Calm, cool, collected the quarterback. Great read, good patience. More importantly, great job up front protecting this quarterback to give you a chance. And that's all you can ask for.
Try to rally down 10. 9:25 to go here in the fourth. Short motion by Amendola from the left. Brady takes the shotgun snap, stands in, throws it left for Amendola, reaches up and snacks a high throw and lands inside the 10, rolling to the 9. Ball slightly behind him, but Danny makes the grab.